We're going to start with some very basic catalog photography techniques. Still life is something that I've been working on for over 30 years. We as photographers in still life have a problem that we're not always photographing the most gorgeous things. It's things that makes the client happy, but it's not beautiful women on a beach, and it's not exotic sports cars, it's product. And this product means so much to the client, we have to treat it like it is an exotic sports car or a fancy fashion shot. So right now we're going to do a couple of shoes in a typical shoe catalog type of thing. And you can see that I've taken my softbox on top and I've brought this light down. We want to bring the light fairly close. Now, I always want to check to see if the light is going to have any flare. So I will come back to the point of the camera and I'll look from the point of the actual product and look back, and I can see whether or not my lens shade is actually doing what it needs to be doing. And it is. If it's not, we need to come in here and bring something to block that light off. We want to remove as much glare and things like that from the lens. It makes the shot, what I call the D-max, the black part of the shot, much better if we can do that. In this case, we are backlighting. I'm going to go ahead and turn off this light right here for a second, and we can see that we're using the top box to bring the light. It's all about creating shape. We're going to bring the light from back to front. We're trying to make a highlight across the shoe, but at the same time we're holding the white detail, but we have to make sure we have enough light in there to bring out the black detail as well. Now what do we have that's going to be some problems here? We have some very, very shiny material on here, very reflective. It's going to be kind of mottled, so we want to make sure that we have a fill in there to fill that in, but we won't want to overfill it. We don't want to make the images look flat. We want to make them look dimensional, but this is not about making a super low-key beauty shot as much as it's making an image that would go in a catalog or on the website. Probably going to end up being dropped out of the background, holding the shadows. We'll talk about that later when we get into Photoshop. I like creating a very, very clean white. 255 is pure white. We want a 255 background, but we want the real shadows. So we're never going to get the background pure white in this initial photograph, because if you get that background pure white, you're probably going to sacrifice the products. You say, well, how do you get that really clean white on white? We're going to take it into Photoshop and we're going to outline that shoe, and we're going to take that background a few steps brighter to make sure that it has a whiter point than the shoe itself. This area, the white laces, we're working on a sense of 0 to 255. We are thinking about like we're shooting transparency film, in that we want to shoot an image as bright as possible without overexposing it. So when we do that, we're looking for holding that white detail. Now for me, white detail has always been, on a scale of 0 to 255, the white detail has been approximately 240 to 245 on that 0 to 255 scale. So that's 256 tones. That last 245 to 255, those last 10 points on that scale, are areas where we are going to lose detail. We're not going to hold the texture. That means that I would not see the texture in those laces or in this mesh up here. So that's very, very key to the client, is that when that goes on a pure white background, when they drop that out, I can't have that lace in this area drop back into the background. It has to have enough separation to be on a clean white and give me that detail. So 0 to 255. That's why I like so much working with the bridge. I can instantly shoot that image, bring it in, and check that number. So let's talk about a couple of tools that we're going to use. I use two tools. Obviously, we've seen the color checker. Now, the color checker, you say, well, there's probably a lot of overlap, but these are two products that I use, and each one does something the other one doesn't do. And actually, two things. The color checker gives me the color profile for the camera and allows me to warm up or cool down from neutral. Now, I've got another target that I find is very, very useful. This is the PhotoMaster target. So a brand new one right here in the bag. Now, this one pops open. This is a very specific 4-point target. Now, it'll say, well, oh, I've seen these before. It works 4 points. But very importantly, not just 3, a white, a middle, and a black. There are 2 different whites we have here. Now, what does this do differently? You say, well, yeah, this also does a custom white balance, but More than that, I can do two things. I can do a custom white balance by shooting through the target. If I needed to, especially more in outdoor shots, I like to find a white balance of the light falling on the subject. In this case, the camera would be at the point of where the shoe is, looking back at the lights, and I can actually take a pre-focus and then hold the translucent part over the lens, shoot a photograph, kind of like what the Expo disc does, and it takes the entire image. It gives me a nice clean white, and I can use that for my custom white balance. But the most important thing, which I love about this particular target, is that when I shoot this properly, and I put I basically zoom in or put a selection around the 4 targets, I get a 4-point histogram. So what we're looking for is 4 spikes on that histogram. Specifically, I'm looking for a difference between these 2 whites. I've got a white that runs around 218 on that scale of 0 to 255. And I got another white here, very reflective, that runs more about 245. Now, these are 2 very, very close white spikes, and what we're trying to do is get information or space on the histogram between these 2 spikes. And when you create that space, you have proper highlight contrast. That is what digital capture is about, whether it's in the studio or on location. It's about proper highlight control and controlling the higher end numbers. A file is as bright as possible without overexposing, so that's great for this particular patch, but we want to make sure that there is good separation down the ramp of highlights. So if I shot this and these 2 whites became the same white, it means that my highlights are plugged up. So I tend to use this one for warming, so I may use sometimes both of them, but this one is really important for me in the studio. Now, you see that I have a background light. Let's go ahead and just we will take the reference shot at the very end with this, but for right now, let's go ahead and get a shot on the screen. I'm going ahead and set up here. We're set up with the 1DS Mark III. I've got the 1.4 teleconverter on this camera. So what this is a 90mm lens with a 1.4 teleconverter. This allows me to have a 135mm tilt shift lens. Now, when I say tilt shift lens, this lens can rotate its axis on the nodal point here and actually tilt the depth of field to make it extended, or go back the other way to make it more shallow. Very important with food photography. When you want to do very, very shallow depth of field, you can actually make it more shallow than the actual f-stop by reversing the depth of field. So in this case, we want to create more depth of field. We want an image like this needs to be absolutely as sharp as possible. So let's go ahead and see. I'm going to focus and make sure we're pretty much set up. I'm happy with no fill card, just the one light. And we'll take a photograph and we're going to bring it. It'll come right into the bridge. We're monitoring it right inside the bridge here. And here's our image. Our first image looks dark. So let's go ahead and take a meter reading. We didn't actually take a meter reading, so we should do that too. I've got a Sekonic light meter here. I will come around over here, get my cable release. I'm going to place my meter into the shot. I'm facing the dome back toward the camera. Okay, so I got my dome fully extended out. I'm clear the meter and fire it. I'm 1/25 at 100 ISO. It's telling me a basic exposure of 16.5. Now, if we relate this to film, in the days of film, we would take a meter reading and it would give us a number. We'd have to take in our bellows factor of the view camera, whatever extraneous factors in, but we would always shoot a Polaroid. Now, this got us to the Polaroid. The Polaroid was the truth. If this said 16.5, but the Polaroid said I should really be f11, would I trust a meter or trust a Polaroid? I would always trust a Polaroid. The Polaroid tells the truth. The meter gets us pretty much in the ballpark. And it can be very calibrated, very accurate, but it's a meter. Now, the same thing with digital is this meter gets me in the ballpark, but I'm going to use the histogram to look at the image. The histogram tells me the truth and reading the numbers. That's why it's so important to be tethered to the computer in the studio. Now, I know if you're a wedding and portrait photographer, you're not going to be running around in the field with a laptop connected to your hip. But in any situation where you are set up for a period of time and in one space, even if like my wife, who's a portrait event photographer, if she would shoot a prom setup, she could literally have a laptop set up and shoot into the camera because she's set up on one specific portrait setting over and over again. Same thing now, but in the tabletop in the studio, I definitely want to be connected either to the laptop or I could have a rolling cart with bigger monitors. In this case, we're working with a laptop. So I've got a meter here at 16.5. I want to just go ahead and take a look, and we're going to take another meter reading later. We can see that it's a little darker. I'm going to go ahead and open up the camera from f22, We'll try 11. I hit a shot here. I can fire the camera from the cable release, from the camera body, or I can shoot it right from the button on the camera, which makes it nice. This is software that just comes with your Canon cameras. You don't have to pay extra for that. There we go. Now I'm a little bit, now I can see that I'm a little bit hot. I wanted to be a little hot just to show you what's going on. You can see the numbers, even just visually saying right off the bat it's a little hot. So let's go back down. I think we weren't looking at the right number here, so right image. Let's go to, let's go to F14. We'll take a new image, comes in, and this will be our new image. A little better. We can say, now we don't have any fill light, we don't have the extra side light on yet, we're just looking this as a simple image. I can take this image right here from the bridge and I can bring that directly in without having Photoshop open. I'm going to open that up right in the bridge. The computer will run much better if Photoshop stays closed down at this point and you're just using the Adobe Camera Raw engine that's located in the bridge. I've actually sort of time checked things, and I feel that when you're shooting live, if you keep Photoshop closed off and just work in the bridge, everything seems to happen just a little bit faster, because in Photoshop you've got all the plugins, it's sucking up a lot of RAM. So I can tell right off the bat by holding my cursor here, I can see that I'm still reading. The background is in 216, so I know I'm not 255, but down here on the white areas of that shoe, I'm reading 221, 220, which means I've got plenty of detail in there. And when we add that second light, it's going to get even a little bit brighter. So that's a good starting point. Now, I'm going to close that off. Because I have the tilt shift lens and I'm working tethered through the computer inside the camera software here, I can use my remote live shooting. So I can bring what's going to use is the video part. I can bring that image in. I can actually adjust and change my white balance to something like tungsten because it's using the modeling lights there. And it's giving me a pretty clean image. The reason why I'm going to bring that up is I can see, I'm going to come around this side here for a second. I can see as I focus the lens, I can literally see on the screen what's going on right here on my screen. Now, the tilt shift lens allows us to change the depth of field by turning the tilt, or I should say swing, in this case, the swing of the camera to go in the direction of the shoe. The shoe is going back away from us, so we're going to take this lens and we're going to swing it away again, and you literally can see in the camera as I swing it away, you don't even need a lot. You can see how if I wanted to make the depth of field very shallow, I've done the opposite swing. I've swung away from the direction. You can see how, wow, the toe is sharp and the shoe instantly falls out of focus. If I swing it in the direction of the shoe, this direction, and refocus, I can pretty much wide open. At some point, I should be able to get most of that shoe pretty sharp. So it's falling off a little bit in the background. And I have the ability to do a rise or fall if I need to. In this case, I have just a slight swing into the direction of the shoe. That's going to work. Now, of course, we're looking at it wide open. And with wide open, we have still a very little depth of field. When we stop down to F16 or F22, that'll bring all the depth of field in. The client needs a very clean, sharp image. We can always add selective focus stuff a little later to make it a little more, artsy, or bring something out. We can use all kinds of techniques to blur that later. Now we're going to go ahead and add our second light. I'll turn on the second light. Now what this did right off the bat, if I turn off the actual modeling light of the top, we're going to come around the back for a second and just turn off our modeling light and just see what that does for us here. We can see how this particular light, if I actually bringing them in, is going to give us this left to right lighting. It's going to give me this really nice highlight across the shoe, and it's going to even increase this shape. Now, we have height and width. It's up to us to shape the light. That's all really photography is. That's what professional level photography is. The difference between, say, just amateur and professional is the fact that we shape the light. We don't take pictures, we make photographs. And whether you're advanced hobbyist or just starting out, it's all the same. We just have to learn how to take it to the next level. The light is our control. We want to shape that. So I feel like this is my general catalog setup for most good product photography. It's not exciting photography, but it's clean and it's going to have good shape to it, and the whites and the blacks will have the detail that is needed for that. So let's go ahead and turn on the backlight again. And we'll bring in our fill card. Now, we should be able to see the difference on the screen as we're working. As I bring this card in, you can see how I'm actually lighting up that silver. In this case, I want to get the card. I've got to figure out how big of a card or how much I need. I'm going to go ahead and need a bigger card. Even though this seems like a big card, I need to cover because of the way that the shoe curves around. I don't want to let too much dark area reflect into the highly reflective areas here. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit larger card. I don't need to have it right up in there pushing too much light, but I do need to have it catching the light. So I might just bring this into the side, and I can see right now that it's doing a pretty good job of getting most of that. And I can come to the camera, look in, and I can see right now that the entire silver area of that shot has now been filled in very, very nicely. And depending on how much power I put through my side light is going to give me the dimension. So let's go ahead and take a new meter reading and see how much more light we actually threw on here. Just interested to see what the meter says compared to what the actual image does. I'm getting 22.5. So adding that extra light in the fill card has brought a lot more light into the photograph. And let's see what we actually got. I can see from my screen it's a little bit overlit. I'm not too happy with that. Again, I'm shooting at f14, no wonder. So let's go ahead and now stop this guy down. We'll go to, let's stop down to full stop and a half. We're going to go to f20 because I think the 22 is going to be a little too much. Let's take a shot, see what we get. And we're getting much, much better image right here. Now, we can see from the previous images before, we did not have the light, the specular light, going into these areas that are very reflective. Now we do. Now we can see how these areas are doing well, and it needs just a little bit more shape to it. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of backlight this a little bit more. I'm going to pull it around the back side, and also, if I can, push this main light back a little bit so it's a little more backlit. The more backlight I get, the more shape I get, and then I'll come in here, and actually sometimes I'll hold the card. I'll look right, I'll get down right where my camera lens is, look at the picture, adjust that as where I need it. I don't want it in too close because I don't want to overfill the shot, but I do want to get the highlights exactly where I want. Hit that, boom, and we should come over here. We should have a pretty good finished shot here. Okay, I'm very, very pleased. And I know it looks like it's not the most shapely shot, but this is exactly what the client needs, is this very clean shot. I do like to take one of those contrast readings just to see how well that's going to look, because I'll tend to use this later in Photoshop. I'm going to bring, without the card in there, I'm just going to go ahead and, because it's more about the main light, I'm not going to face the card directly to the PhotoMaster target. I don't face it directly to the lens. I turn it at an angle. It's about a 45-degree angle because I want some of the specular light from that side light to hit that shiny surface to give me the two different whites. I actually like it this way, the higher, and then we go click. I'm going to come down here where I get it. That'll work, I think, a little bit better. Yeah, this is going to be probably a little bit better. We'll open this up in Camera Raw. I'll use my crop tool just so I can isolate that area right there. And I'm not getting my separation too well, but this is what I'm looking for, is two separate. On the white-on-white kind of sets, it's sometimes tough to get that. But this is telling me from right here, I can actually adjust the image by, lowering my blacks or my fill light, or dropping in more blacks to change the histogram. I literally can correct this image by watching how these spikes work. Let's go ahead and actually do the real shot now. Let's go ahead and cancel that. And let's do the real shot, and we can move on from there. So let's get our card in here and do our last shot here. Okay, that should work. Our final image, we'll look at that in Camera Raw. And I think we've got a good clean image that we'll be able to start with. Now we'll go over here in Camera Raw. We can actually apply that profile. This is where we would do that right here, just to see if there's any difference. Mark II profile, click that. And this is so much white on white, you don't really see a big change, but the colors basically have a much better relationship to each other. So that's the standard starting point for the first product shot.